So we got a good one for you today. Theresa May is going to revoke Article 50 and she just can't admit it. The Prime Minister has no other choice. In the 1,022 days since the 7.4 million people voted for Brexit, some wonderful things have happened. Most of the country now understands the Good Friday Agreement, knows how the single market works, and has figured out that Boris Johnson is about as poisonous emission-wise as a rocket made of bratwurst and then powered by some posh throbber hanging out the window and shouting blah as he passes by. This newly discovered knowledge is of benefit to the nation, but there is a price to pay. We've got political chaos. The far right and some of the saddest are on a TV news desk has deemed it necessary for us to have a daily dose of the stunning knuckle Mark Francos. He's the sort of gammon that will never produce crackling, just retain a wobbly white outer shell. He's swine fever in a suit. So yes, those bits of the electorate that could be bothered to vote for Brexit, and the other 73.5% of the population learned why not voting was a bloody stupid idea. If more people had voted Leave, the country wouldn't be so divided. If more had voted Remain, the nation could have kept its sanity. But after two meaningful votes, there weren't a bunch of indicative votes that didn't, and no confidence vote that produced too much confidence. And that's a lot of talk about how you can't vote again on these things, and there's only one option left for the Prime Minister: to cancel Brexit. After a year of belligerent red lines and waving Liam Fox around, Theresa May lost her majority. A year after that, she lost her party, and now she doesn't have enough support to run a bath, never mind the country. She has not and cannot and will not get her deal through Parliament, even with the help of the Labour Party. That she's just realised that it exists, that the Reds are just as divided and no more likely to follow instructions than the Blues, who will appear to be slightly less well behaved than a toddler on a jelly and crack come down. With all our parliamentary work shelved, moribund or ignored, there's no way for her to build popularity ahead of a general election, which she cannot afford anyway. There's only 1.5 million in the Tory coffers, and the hedge funds are keeping their wallets shut until the odds are in their favour. Leaving the EU is dependent upon controlling our borders, and seeing as our only land border is with the EU is the one border we can't control, there is a probability no from a deal, and that could get a majority support either from the country or Parliament. All statements to the contrary are a complete sham, and a patience of doing the homework is entirely requested. Theresa knows that, she's just not telling you. If a general election were held, it would probably produce a Parliament just as badly hung. Likewise, a second referendum, the turnout would probably be lower, and a mandate, therefore, even more furiously debate than the first. The EU wouldn't recognise the deal for the simple reason that the one they've offered is performing precisely as it hoped. It protects its members and preserves the Good Friday Agreement, and that makes it perfectly clear that remaining is indefinitely a wiser choice. It has already offered a short extension, and Theresa is just asking today for another one, to June the 30th. She might be given as long as a year. We know now that Brexit Day is now Halloween, which I find quite hilarious. If Theresa cannot change the parliamentary arithmetic, and all indicators are that she can't, all she could do is make it much worse, there are only two possibilities. First, the UK could leave without a deal, and there are two arguments in favour of this. One, it requires no effort at all, and two, about 20% of the public actually support it. The arguments against are manifold, including the fact that 52% of the country thinks it's a damn silly idea. But the strongest is that it will require instant border checks in Northern Ireland, followed by the same smucks negotiating terms with the World Trade Organization member countries. And if that happens, we must just as well let the IRA have the crown jewels as well. Mercifully, there is no way a no deal would get past Parliament, and that is the point. That all of these things Theresa May actually has the power to do boils down to the bleeding obvious. With no way to resolve the impasse in Parliament or population, no agreement that could appease enough people, and even without even the option of saying just fuck it, let's hoard all the dishwater tablets and gin, there is only one thing the Prime Minister can do without asking for anyone else's approval. She can revoke Article 50 unilaterally, without consultation, without asking Parliament if it minds, without breaching any legal obligations to rule the result of the referendum. It requires only a letter, a stamp, and some realism. She just will not or cannot admit that is now her only option. The problem she faces in doing this is one of marketing, which is perhaps why she's treading water, hoping that a catchy strapline presents itself. How do you reverse a ferret once it's up your Fran Merkel trousers and has your name on it? The problem with Brexit has always been political necessity. It was always necessary for the Tories to settle the issue. It was necessarily they asked the country to do it because they couldn't. And then, even though it was the opposite of what people voted for, it will become necessary to trigger Article 50 before we had a plan because David Cameron said that's what he would do. The fact that he was on the losing side and then ran away was no reason for anyone to question the strategy, which proves disastrous. Only now we're knee-deep in the doo-doo and being attacked simultaneously by fanatics, Frenchies, the IRA and Braveheart. The referendum was politically binding, not legally, so all efforts to enforce it are being done not because the law requires it, but because previous statements by the politicians do. Increasingly, these promises are sounding like the sort of thing that you will hear from someone in the pub with a convenient glut of Albanian cigarettes. Only when retreat becomes politically necessary will Theresa call it, and we are perhaps only weeks away from that point. 1 million have marched for revocation. 6 million have signed their names to it. The fascists have fought police outside Downing Street. Trust in politicians has never been so low, and economic growth has slowed to the point where we could all be overtaken by basket-weaving sloths. The cabinet couldn't agree on a cup of tea. Parliament have stopped parleying and stopped sprouting Timsonian poems like angsty year 10s, and there's even passionate leavers who are starting to say this was all a terrible idea. When the EU turns around and says it cannot keep granting us silly extensions that solve nothing, when repeated cliff edge undermine the economy, when the next general election is in 2021, looks unacceptably impossible, Theresa will have to revoke Article 50. She will perhaps sell it as the technically delay and that it would be triggered again when there's support for it. She might say it was a false deadline, or that a big boy made her do it and run away. But it is generally the only thing that she has the power to do. She knows it, and now you know it. She just won't admit it. In the case it makes her look bad, in the meantime, we're left to watch Mark Furless style Pinky on the evening news while praying for a rain of mustard. So that's the situation we're in, and bizarrely, that is something Theresa May can do. She can just decide, well, we're in this mess, there is no plan, so you know what? I'm going to pull Article 50 until an actual plan can be come up with that people will agree on. And here's the thing, it's not, stopping the referendum or anything like that, but what will happen once Article 50 is pulled, no one in their right mind will ever want to trigger Article 50 ever again.